A few days ago, we were talking about businesses and how 41% of businesses cannot pay the rent right now. That's obviously not a very good omen for where the economy is going, especially if you saw that chart in the video. I'll actually put it up one more time here so you guys can see just how much the business delinquencies have been going up and the amount of people that cannot pay the rent. Well, guess what now, guys? Now it's time to talk about the average person, the consumer. And it turns out, based on a recent survey from Credit Karma, 25% of Americans right now cannot afford to pay the rent. That is pretty substantial. Now, that means 75% still can, so that's a good thing, but 25% of people that are saying they can't afford it right now is going to change the way the housing market operates, because a lot of these people that can't afford to pay are on the younger side, surprise, surprise, and what they're going to do is they're going to look to pool together, they're going to live with roommates, they're going to move back in with their parents or grandparents or something like that. And what that will do is it will change the dynamics of the housing market and the demand for housing in general. And we can see that it's clearly the younger people that are getting hit by this, because Gen Zers, 31% of them say that they already live with their parents, and 27% of them say that they can't afford to pay rent. Even Gen Xers and baby boomers are saying that they're compromising on necessities right now to be able to afford to pay their rent or their house payment. Now, another thing that people that can't afford the rent are doing right now, besides moving back in with their parents, is they're moving to more affordable areas of the country, which I think is actually the smartest thing to do. I mean, it's fine to move back in with your parents if you're gonna use that time wisely and save your money towards maybe buying a house or, invest the difference, do something with that extra time that you're going to spend at your parents' house. But if you really want to stay on your own and stay independent, a lot like I did when I was younger, I think it just makes more sense to move somewhere more affordable and continue making it on your own. Not only will you have a higher sense of pride and accomplishment in your life, but also it might present some new and good opportunities for you. Maybe you will be able to afford to buy a house in an area like that. Maybe you're not going to feel so pressured with the cost of life in a more affordable city because everything doesn't cost a fortune. Who knows, maybe you'll even end up with a little extra money in your pocket left over every month after paying all the bills if you move to a cheaper area. So there can be a lot of benefits to doing something like that. But one of the most alarming parts of this survey from Credit Karma is that 57% of Americans use the majority of their income on housing costs, which leaves little remaining balance of their budget for anything else. So that's clearly not sustainable, guys. And that's once again one of the main arguments of why I don't think home prices or rents have any room to grow any higher, because that's well over half of the people that are saying that they're already spending most of their income on just paying for a place to live. So whenever that number continues to rise, it's going to have too much of a downside effect on all the rest of the economy in terms of people not having money to spend on doing any extracurricular activities. That's going to be too much of a downer on the economy, and I think it's naturally just going to correct itself. That's what I think will happen. You can't just have a working population working just to pay the rent or just to pay the mortgage and not buy other things, guys, because there's more to the economy than just real estate. All these other businesses need to be thriving as well for things to be balanced and be working well. And basically what's been happening is people have just been barely hanging on. Wage growth was 5%, maybe 5.5% throughout 2023, just barely beating inflation. But if you account for inflation, it's basically like no increase in income at all. And if you didn't get a wage increase in 2023, then you're essentially making less money because of inflation. The lucky ones who did get a wage increase, and combined with that, along with the credit card spending, which we know has been completely out of control since it's at record high levels right now, people have been able to stay afloat financially. But that's probably not going to last much longer on this trajectory. You could even think of it like most people's households right now are operating similar to our government, where they're spending more money than they bring in. But the difference is our government has the ability to print extra money when they need it at our expense, and we have to deal with the consequences. But average households don't have that ability. The closest thing we have to printing money as consumers is credit cards. And as we can see, people are tapping into that because you're borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today. That's what credit card spending is when you don't pay off the bill every month. But people only have access to so much credit cards. People will not be able to continue credit card spending and borrowing from the future if they're not making their payments, guys. There's going to come to a point where credit card companies will stop lending to people if they're not paying their bills or their credit score is slipping too much. Now, speaking of people going into debt, I saw something today that is just unbelievable, guys. Nearly half of the people out there think that they will pass debt on to loved ones when they die. So, first of all, why do we have to inherit debt? Like, why would it be my responsibility to pay for somebody else's debt, or likewise for you? Like, if somebody else runs up the tab and they die, why on earth would it get passed down to you? You're not the one that ran up the tab. And first of all, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know much about this topic, but I'm not really sure if somebody can legally be held responsible for somebody else's debt. So 46% of Americans say they believe they'll pass their debt on to loved ones if they died today. And that's according to a recent survey from Policy Genius. That was just at the beginning of this year in 2024. So this is fresh information. Just since 2019, Americans have taken on an additional $2.9 trillion worth of household debt, which is staggering. And the average adult right now carries an excess of $22,000 in debt, excluding the mortgage, guys. So you're talking credit card debts, personal loans, different things like that that people just don't pay off. Well, what we have here, folks, is either an attempt at another get-rich-quick scheme or somebody who needs to get out of this property because they can't afford it. They bought it back in August of 2022 for $4 million, and now they have it listed for $4.385 million, but have had it listed since August of 2023 for almost $4.6. So they have lowered the price substantially while they're carrying a $65,000 a year property tax bill. Do they need help? Are they trying to get out? Are they trying to get rich quick? Because they're not going to be making any money after the sale of this property once they pay all the closing costs and their realtor their hefty commission. And out of those figures, the average person is carrying $6,000 in credit card debt right now. At 20, 25%, sometimes 30% interest rates, just look at the amount of interest you'll be paying each month. And you can quickly see how that can spiral out of control. Now, once again, this is something that plagues the younger generations because 17% of millennials expect that if they were to die today, that their loved ones would inherit their debt. And only 7% of Gen Xers said that, and only 2% of baby boomers think that. So clearly, baby boomers are the clear winner when it comes to financials across the board, guys. They own the most real estate, they have the highest amount of net worth, they have the lowest amount of debt, because they're basically the luckiest generation in history. Like, you can just, pat them on the back all you want and say, they were smart or whatever, but it's just a confluence of being in the right place at the right time is what it is. Baby boomers were able to live through arguably the best part of American history when our economy was essentially booming for many years. Wage growth was outpacing inflation by a pretty handsome amount. They were able to get good jobs with benefits and pension plans and all sorts of things that helped propel them into the future. But these are all things that we really don't have today. And I'm not sitting here trying to cry and complain about that. I am just stating the fact here that they had a massive leg up, whereas today's generation doesn't. And let's not forget about housing, right? Like, they were able to buy houses in many cases for 60, 70 grand, and those houses now are worth $600,000-$700,000, literally increasing in value tenfold throughout the time they've owned it. No other generation in history has ever gotten that lucky. And like I said, that's just luck. If you bought a home and you're a baby boomer, you're probably rich by default. Although the most troubling part of this survey to me is the fact that wealthier Americans are more worried about passing on debt than poor Americans. They talk to people who are earning $150,000 or more per year, and 58% of them said that they expect to pass on debt, compared to 47% of those who don't earn as much. Now, Policy Genius, who conducted this survey, said that this is most likely due to the fact that people who earn more money get into more debt, and they have the ability to borrow more money, and they're more worried about it because they have more debt sitting on their balance sheet that's being ready to pass down to the next generation. But everything seems to have an agenda these days, and it seems like the whole point of this story that I read is about people obtaining life insurance, because they go on to say how, you know, a bunch of these people that are worried about passing on the debt don't have any life insurance. In fact, 21% of those who were surveyed who expect to pass on debt say that they don't have any, and that's why people are worried about it. So basically what they want you to do is they want you to buy life insurance after reading this. You know, they want people to believe that they're covered and that somehow their loved ones are not going to have to pay for any of their debts once they're gone. But that's probably a bunch of BS, because we know how insurance is such a huge scam, and they try to get out of paying for everything when it comes to car insurance claims and homeowners insurance claims. And I'd be willing to bet that life insurance claims are no different, because what life insurance really is it's a way to invest. It's a way to evade estate taxes. It's like a cash reserve that people can borrow from. I don't know much about life insurance, but I know they have different types of it, and there's ones that you can pull money out of and things like this. And so it's just another scam, if you ask me, guys. But if anybody out there is an attorney, especially like a family lawyer or somebody who knows about this stuff, like when people die, can they legally pass on debt to you? Like, you know, say your parents pass away and they have a bunch of credit card debt. Obviously, if they have any liens against their house, that'll probably take care of itself when the house is sold. But when it comes to unsecured personal debt, does the next generation who inherits that actually have any responsibility of paying it? If somebody out there knows this and you are in fact a lawyer, let us all know, because I have no clue. Now, when it comes to real estate and the housing market in general, what I always see is that we're all living in this alternate reality, guys. Like literally, you have people saying, I'm seeing nothing but low inventory and prices going up where I live. And then you have a bunch of other people saying that no, prices are down year over year. I'm seeing inventory explode and houses are now cheaper than they were a year ago. So obviously, people's reality are going to be different based on where you live. And this chart that just came out from Freddie Mac kind of gives us a huge insight into this. Like, check this out, guys. No wonder we're all living in this alternate reality, because when you look at this list, this chart, almost every single place where real estate values are down is located in the western half of the US. According to this chart, I only saw a few places on here, like in New Orleans, Louisiana, Hammond, Louisiana, that's on the East Coast, and then Bangor and Lewiston, Maine are on this list of where prices are down. But everywhere else on this list is located in the western half of the US. And I remember covering a story like this earlier in 2023, that it's literally the tale of two housing markets right now, where the western half of the country is sinking in most places and the eastern half is still thriving. You're still seeing prices go up. So I think it's just important for people to recognize this and understand that it really does matter where you live, guys. But overall, this is a good thing to see that there's this many markets across the country that are losing value right now is promising for people that have been waiting on the sidelines and hoping that they can become a homeowner one of these days. This is signs of progress right here, because we were not seeing this a year ago, 2 years ago. Now, earlier I kind of mentioned baby boomers and how they're basically the luckiest and wealthiest generation. Well, here's a story that actually backed this up, okay? Because in the last decade, we have seen the value of the US housing market double. So in 10 years, home prices have literally doubled, which is something that we've never seen before happen ever in the history of this country, first of all. And baby boomers are the ones who benefited from this the most, because they were the ones who owned the most real estate during this time frame. So like I said, being in the right place at the right time. But just look at how staggering these numbers are, guys. In 2012, the total value of the US housing market was about $13 trillion. Well, now it's almost doubled to $24 trillion. And most of that appreciation came in the last few years. When you take a look at this chart, you guys can see it dipped back during the last housing crisis and then started to go back up. But then it really shot up during that gray line, which is the pandemic. Big surprise, right? We all know that. But here's why it has made baby boomers so rich. Because out of that $24 trillion worth of US real estate, baby boomers hold 18 trillion of it, guys. That is the lion's share. That is almost all of it. Now, I made a little error, because actually the total value of the US housing market as of right now is $46.8 trillion. But What we were talking about earlier is the value of mortgaged homes across the US. So the total value of mortgaged homes is 24 trillion, and baby boomers own 18 trillion of that. So still, guys, it's still a lot, right? But the biggest problem with this, it creates this massive shortfall in the entry-level homes. You know, you have baby boomers buying those to downsize, right? You have big corporations like BlackRock and Blackstone and Open Door buying up the cheaper homes to rent out as investments. So, you know, the problem is all the cheapest homes that most young people would actually be able to afford are now owned by corporations or old people. Because as a lot of you have pointed out on my channel, like, well, Michael, we're seeing these huge price reductions on houses that are already expensive, but you don't see it that much on the lower end. And this is why, guys, because everybody wants a slice of that. Everybody wants to buy that $250,000 house, whether it's for an investment or to live in, because that's simply where the profit is to be made on the investment side of things, and that's where people can afford to live when you're talking about people's household income. So it makes sense from both perspectives of that's what people want to buy. That's what's helped us drive up the cost of housing so much. But one thing that young people need to remember from all of this is just because the baby boomers have all of the wealth right now doesn't mean it's going to stay like that forever, guys. One day they're not going to need that house anymore for a variety of different reasons, okay? And someone's going to get that house, whether it's through the house being sold or being inherited and then sold. Because literally 75% of the homes that are inherited through somebody that passes away get sold. They don't keep the house. Usually they just want the money. You know, when somebody inherits a house, they usually can't afford to keep the house, first of all, because they already have their own house to pay for, and then they're faced with, do I keep this house as a second home, try to swing both payments, or do I turn it into a rental property, and do I want to be a landlord? And that's why most people say, you know what, let's just take the cash and run. It's going to be easier to do that. And then they'll upgrade their lifestyle and buy a nicer, bigger home for themselves or whatever. So really my point is that even though it might be frustrating right now, and things might not work in your favor right now as a young person, just understand that it's not going to be like that forever. Because there's one thing about money, guys, is you can't take it with you when you're dead. So all that money will inevitably go down to the next generation in some form or another. Whether it's through inheritance, whether it's through being able to pick up a deal. But I think if you're a young person who's struggling to pay the rent, like we were talking about earlier, I think it's definitely smart to figure out ways to cut costs and move in with other people in order to circumvent that for now and better your future, guys, because the last thing you want to do is be constantly trying to play catch up, be constantly trying to spend all of your income just to remain on your own. You know, because I did this actually myself. When I first moved to Miami, I was only 20 years old, okay? And I was paying enormous rent, okay? Think about this. It was 2008. And just to stay in a bedroom, okay, I was sharing the place with a roommate. I had to pay $1,700 per month. And back then, that was a lot of money, okay? It's still a lot of money today. But imagine how much it was in 2008 before we had this massive inflation, okay? So I had to pay $1,700 a month plus an extra $300 a month in utility costs because my roommate was insane and left the lights on all day long and wanted me to pay for the phone bill and the cable bill and half of all that stuff, right? So it quickly added up, as you can imagine. So I had to come up with $2,000 a month as a 20-year-old that just moved to Miami, and that was just to pay the rent. That's none of my food or other living expenses, nothing. And you know what I decided to do? Because I was spending most of my money on rent, I ended up getting my own place that was far cheaper. I ended up renting a place for only $900 a month. So I was literally able to cut my rental payment more than in half and be living on my own on top of that and not have a roommate. Now today it's kind of the opposite dynamic where you have to get a roommate in order to lower that cost or move back in with your parents, but it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter what you have to do. I think you should do it in order to better your financial future, because that was probably one of the smartest things I ever did back then to start getting myself ahead, getting to a point where I can actually start saving some money. And if it wasn't for doing that, I might have not been able to make it as a young person here. I might have had to turn around and go back to Illinois and live in my parents' basement. And chances are, if that would have happened, you wouldn't be watching this video right now. So If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.